Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Doctors podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah. Now, can I get this right? Sarah Hirebet.
Hirebet, you got it perfectly.
Yeah, Hirebet. Cool. Thank you for your patience on that. So, Sarah, healing, the $1 trillion question. What does healing mean to you?
What does it mean? I thought about this quite a bit, and I feel like there are two really big components that are part of my life, probably on a daily basis. And kind of the first one is this idea of deconstruction and taking apart the narrative that I've been fed and that I've spent my whole life believing, but that which this narrative has been built on a lie, a giant untruth. And what does it mean to me to take that apart and bring truth back into my life? So I'd like to spend some time talking about that. Cool. And I think for me, my second part is understanding my ability to self-support as ultimately key for my healing, which has been, I think, a very contentious subject with myself. And perhaps this is because at the core of the wound we're trying to heal as adopted people is having been relinquished and given up when we were very small and had no control. And in a space where it was the job of other people to support us. And we missed something. And now I think a lot of the manifestation of problems in my life, of things that are maladaptive, comes from this moment where I didn't get the support, but I missed the window where it was supposed to come from other people. And I'm now a 45-year-old woman who's responsible for providing it for myself.
Yeah. Is that a similar kind of thing to self-parenting?
I mean, yes, and I do a lot of it. I think my journey into becoming a parent is actually the key moment for the beginning of all of this. My deconstruction began on the day that I gave birth to my first son, and before then, I would have steadfastly told you that I would have bought into the narrative in every way that adoption is a good and wonderful thing that solves a problem for an out of luck mother and a poor infertile couple and this baby that has a big need, right? And then I had this moment that is almost indescribable in its rawness, where physically I was as vulnerable as humanly possible, mentally, spiritually, in every way. I'm in hours of pain that's novel to me. I haven't had a baby before. And it breaks down into this dark place in your soul right before you give birth, where you have to make some decisions about engaging in that process. And something that I didn't know, despite so much preparation, was that there was a wound there for me that was blocking this normal, natural maternal process. And there was no medical intervention that was going to be able to help me, but not a physical medical intervention. But for me, I had been in labor for over 20 hours, and I had been pushing for 3.5, which is a really long time. And I was giving birth at a midwife center. And I know midwives are something that you're much more familiar with over there in the UK, but it's not necessarily as common here in the US. So I was not in a hospital. I was with people who were very centered on women's care. And they came and they said to me and my then husband, she's got ketones in her urine, she's weak, her labor is slowing down. We need to think about a transfer to the hospital. And I disassociated so hard. I didn't know, and now I recognize it's what it is, but my brain broke with fear and just pure terror to leave this space. And I remember all this buzz and hustle around, and my ex-husband said to the nurse, "Why are you taking her there?" "Well, she needs rest, and we'll give her an epidural and we'll have her rest." And he said, "If that is what she needs, that this is not going to help her. Can she stay here?" And we got a hold of a doctor who apparently said, "Hey, we could take another moment. We can let her rest." They gave me a quarter dose of Nubane, which is not a pain relief drug, but a drug that makes you a little fuzzy, I guess, mentally. Yeah. But and I'm lying there, and my doula is patting my head, and my contractions have stopped. And I looked up at her and I said, "Jan, I want you to know that I'm trying as hard as I can. I don't want to." And she said, "Why?" And this thing just bubbled up inside of me, and I said, if I give birth to this baby, I would find out that I love this baby in a way that I was not loved, because I was given away. And so happens, and I don't know why, I had been so insistent during my whole pregnancy that my mom, my adoptive mother, be there as a support person. And I think I said to myself, "Oh, she didn't get to do this, so maybe she'd like to join and have an experience with me." And now I realize that maybe some part of me knew this thing that hadn't surfaced before. And my doula went and got my mom, and she held me, and she said, "Oh, honey, the moment they put you into your arms, you were my baby. I've loved you." And I needed to know that. And I have to say that, like, the world shifted. Like, I became filled with energy, and I stood up. And my ex-husband's like holding underneath my arms, and I'm like squatting right there, and I give birth to my baby. Like, I've gone from no labor to this reassurance that my soul was calling out for. And I'm able to do this thing. And now I've got my son in my arms, and I'm just awash with a sense of love and awe. And then the very next thought is, oh, for Maureen, my birth mother, oh, how did she do this? What happened to her? How did she survive? And then I started to sit down and say, well, what are the answers to these questions? What does this mean? This thing that I thought was wonderful actually had the power to stop me from being able to give birth until I began to take it apart.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a long journey with respect to that. We have loyalties. I mean, obviously, I love my mom very much. I have a relationship with my birth mother who found me when I was 24, and I'm 45 now, and that's been difficult for me to suss out. And one thing that I know, and I'm very lucky in this, is that from the time of finding her, she expressed nothing but distress and fear and worry. She told me that you have been with me. I mean, I remember when I first spoke to her, and I didn't understand it then, because then I was 24 and I didn't have babies. And she said, "Are you okay? her first words to me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And, yeah, I'm okay. I'm great. I've got a great life. Right. Because for me, she hadn't really been present in a narrative sense, in a way that I could remember in my mind. She was there, though, in a body way. And my body knew that we had been separated. And that it meant something. And it wasn't until I dug into therapy with a adoption and trauma competent person who could give me education and, resources to read about the way that these memories are stored and that they're meaningful, that I could really start that deconstruction process and say, oh, this didn't matter to me. I was there when this happened. Some part is remembered. And I think that is made all the harder by society saying, well, these babies are a blank slate. I mean, my parents were told that I would that I would fulfill their needs to have a baby, and that they could raise me and that would work, and that these replacement parents, these surrogates, were enough. And I actually find it, as to speak of healing, that it is a rather constant problem in the side, a thorn in the side of my healing, to live in a society that insists that that's true, that doesn't have a nuance for or a respect for that dyad, a respect for a thing that I came to know when I had my own baby, that mother and infant are in relationship in the womb. They're in relationship throughout the process of labor. They're in relationship moments after, when you just intuitively bring them to your breast. They're in relationship for months afterwards, when the baby, when only nursing and only mama and only that physical connection will do. And we know this. We know that babies that, even if they don't have that nursing mama nearby, that they need that touch. They need that. And that it matters if that touch is not a remembered touch, if the voice is different, if things are off. And I think that one of the reasons it's such a hard conversation is that there's a lot of people out there trying to meet a really important need. I mean, I love being a mother. It's been fundamental and transformative and beautiful in my life. And I would have deep and abiding sorrow if I couldn't have parented. And sometimes I spend time talking to my current husband, who is the biological father of a child between us, and who stands as a parent to the two children that I had from my prior marriage. And I see how he parents them, and I can run those parallels to how my parents parented me. And I know that you don't have to have a biological connection to have a wonderful relationship, have a true parent and child connection. But I also know that there's been a harm for me in having been asked as a human to have a purely surrogate relationship, to have lost in this sudden and dramatic way that initial first connection, and that I have a hunger for it, to find something for it. And before I knew any of these things, before I began this deconstruction, before I could understand, I was reaching out in my life, within my relationships, going, how do I get attached? How do I feel connected? How do I feel closer to people I'm dating, to people I'm married to friends? And often in ways that we're maladaptive.
Well,
and I guess that's what gets back. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, you see, we're looking in the wrong filing cabinet, with the how question, aren't we? All the stuff that you're talking about has been about instinct. Well, yeah, it's been about instinct. It's been about feelings. It's been about connections. It's not been anything to do with the brain department, other than obviously the huge impact of knowing that somewhere in your body there was something in your body was stopping you delivering your first son until it didn't anymore. There was also a cataclysmic shift that you've described so eloquently, and so powerfully and so emotionally. The how question is like it's chalk and cheese, isn't it? Or even more extreme than that.
How can we make up for this thing? How can we protect against the impact?
I never
in the first,
I never ask people, how do you heal?
Yeah.
For some reason, I've never I played around with the questions that I ask. It's not a logic thing. It's not healing isn't a logic thing. It's an insight thing. It's a shift. We don't make the shifts happen. We hang out and listen to podcasts and read books and go to therapy, and it happens. But we don't make it happen. I don't know. No. You won't wake up in the morning thinking, I'm sure how I'm going to heal myself today, do we?
Right. But it starts, that's where I get back to. It starts with knowing that there is something to be healed. Yeah. And a lot of people would really like us adopted people to be grateful and content in this space, and to not point out the harm. Because if we're sitting here saying, you have hurt me, you hurt me when you adopted me, you hurt me when you gave me up to be adopted. Well, that's terribly confrontational and really difficult to say to birth families and to say to adoptive families. You have caused harm. And they would really rather say, no, we have done good.
Well, we've bought into you described, you said that the narrative had been fed to you and you believed it. And I think we've all done that as adoptees, but also the other people have been bought into a narrative as well. They've fallen. Yep. They've fallen for it, and so who's been perpetuating the myth? And the people that benefited,
right? And in the end, it's not you or I, right? We were infants. We didn't have agency at the time. And if I can sit and I can say, within the power structure of how this works, and look at my parents, and I'm gonna give them a lot of grace for being people who adopted in 1978. Where did they go? They were like, my mother had a brain tumor. She could not have children. And someone, society said, we have a path for you. Here is a way. And society also told her, and everyone accepted, this path is a good one because there's a mother out there who needs your help, who doesn't have the resources she needs. And the best answer is to take her baby and give her to you who have resources, instead of, I don't know, give her resources. So they operated in that space. And I would say today and right now, I'll deal with my own healing. I'm responsible for it. But if other people in the world would like not to perpetuate harm, then my first statement to them is, do not participate in that lie that there is this freely available baby that needs you out there if you're trying to adopt children. You are kidding yourself if you think it's simple or if it's good. And maybe my parents have some reasons we can be sympathetic because they didn't have access to information. But right now, if you're listening to this, but out in the world with what we can research, what we can look up, what we can hear, how adoptees are able to speak and we could be heard. I hope people listen. And I know because I've had a lot of conversations with people who aren't. And, part of my healing is setting that aside and saying, I will put this out there, but I won't own whether you decide to be ethical with that information. Right? That's not on me. I can't change the whole world, but I can put my story out.
Yeah. So the self-support bit.
Yeah.
What do you mean by self-support? Because I said parenting, and then we went.
Yeah,
we went in a different way, different direction.
We did.
I'll bring you back around.
I think that it begins with just knowing that is even possible. That if there are wounded parts that are caught back in a younger time, right? In my understanding from the therapy and the reading I've done is that these parts can get stuck. So there's a little baby self someplace sitting there with its chubby little arms up going, pick me up, hold me close, fix it. And that part's still out here, right? And it can show up. And so somebody can say something to me out in the world, maybe at work. And that part can rise up and say, pick me up, take care of me, hold me, fix it. Except if I did that to you right now, you'd be repelled. You'd be like, oh, you can't demand that, because when a little one does it, we go, oh, hey. And when an adult does it,
I'd give you a hug. I might give you a hug, Sarah. I wouldn't pick you up, but I'd give you a hug. Right?
Right. And there's like a level, right? Like my husband can come and give me a hug when I'm sad, but he can't be responsible for regulating my bodily systems that are triggered through trauma, right? So that's what I mean by self-help. That self-regulation, that if we help babies regulate, adults have to be able to do it on their own. And so learning, I think I spent a lot of my life engaged in spaces and relationships where I was pushing outwards and hoping that someone else was going to co-regulate with me or help me soothe those parts. And having somebody say, hey, you can learn to do it yourself, was a revelation to me. So if that's a takeaway here, and I bet there's a lot of adopted people. I spent a lot of years going, I can't, I need something from out there.
Yeah. And
being able to say,
that's the lie as well, though. That's another lie. That's another lie, that whether you are a department store, a perfume manufacturer, a church, and like an adoption agency, whatever you are, they're all trying to, the line is anybody trying to persuade us that we need them. I know how you feel. I know how you feel.
Yeah,
I used to feel like you did. Come and spend some time with me. Come and spend some money with me, and I'll make you right. This was on we got into a similar line of conversation on the the interview that I had just before this. But you know, it's healing is an inside job.
Ah, there you go. That's it. Healing is an inside job, and there are lots of people offering you external things. And I think one you mentioned, the church, is of particular note. In talking to other adoptees and in examining my own experience, I think that adopted people are often highly susceptible to religious influence, especially high control religions and religions that want to provide you with a, this will fix it all, this will fill it, give it all over to God.
And it's not just us, though. This is their culture. So Catholics,
yes,
is you're born bad.
Yeah.
You need to be good. You can become good by going to church, and we'll make you get into. We'll let you into heaven. I mean, that's the essence of.
We'll let you in, and we'll fulfill what you're wanting, what you're yearning. I mean, I grew up in these churches singing songs about this perfect Jesus that was going to fill the whole, which is an externalization, right? Which is not a, I will fill the whole and I will learn to regulate what is hard.
And the politicians do this as well. We're not just,
they do.
We're not just, we're not just picking on the church.
I mean, propaganda works the same way, right? It's super simple. It's clear, and it makes people feel better. Hey, well, here's a simple problem, or a simple solution to your problem, and we want that. We seek out these spaces to fill ourselves up until we learn that we need to fill it ourselves. And I think that I by no means have achieved perfection here, but I have worked very hard to be able to recognize through a number of signals, is the voice that's talking, is what's going on in my brain, is it rigid, is it insistent, is it absolutist? That's probably a child voice, that's probably a triggered voice, and I need to find the part in myself that has great wisdom. And that part for me has been deeply informed by my motherhood and by how natural it was for me to care for my little ones and to say, hey, this is a part of me. I have this innate power and ability, deep competence. I was able to grow a human, give birth to them, nurture them, care for them. One of them's 14. He's off, doing so much out on his own. I'm doing this thing. It's powerful and profound. And I don't give the credit to God for that. I did those things, and I own my power in that space. And that means that I can learn. If I can help them with all their big feelings, I can help me with all my big feelings. So, and that may not be the source for everyone, right? But I think we've got to find some place, when I tap into my higher self and my higher wisdom, it's that part of me that feels that deep competence and calm. And you spoke of reparenting, and can be present, can parent myself, can parent that part of me that is unregulated and gibbering and scared, right?
Yeah. Have you done any IFS stuff, internal family systems, on your therapist?
Yeah, that's part of that's part of the methodology. We spend this time divvying up the parts, identifying them, giving them a space to exist. I think my early methodologies before doing that kind of work involved suppressing those parts and just saying, well, you're not allowed to throw a fit, you're not allowed to be here, or you're not allowed to be angry, right? I've got some very overdeveloped self-protective parts that are aggressive, that pop out, that I think developed in this maladaptive way to take care of my little relinquished self, right? And sometimes I think about those parts as needing like another job. You know, like a border collie needs some work to do. My protective parts need some place out there away from good society to do another job, to feel okay, like they're not needed here, right? Because they
Yeah.
don't help me in my relationship and with my kids, and they'll help me with my husband, then they'll help me with my family. And so a lot of this, when I think about healing, it's about, hey, where are all these parts and how do they get supported? How do they get what they need? How do we see them and hear them without necessarily letting them drive? Another thing that's been really recent in my journey towards healing, and again, you're right, how do we do, I don't know, it's not prescriptive here, but something my therapist said to me just really openly. She said, you talk a lot about this yearning, this thing you're looking for. And she said, but I've also noticed that when you talk about your birth mother, my birth mother, Maureen, she said, you other her. And what do you think about that? And I mean, I knew exactly what she was talking about, that I often don't cleanly identify with her, that I don't think of her as mom, that I don't jump to what our similarities are, even when it's obvious that we actually have a gestic vocabulary that's really similar. Like biologically, we move our hands the same way, right? Like things came from her, right? And so I spent some time really chewing on why I was doing this. And talked, had a lot of therapy sessions around it. And my therapist said, well, think about this. Maybe it's not right, maybe it is. But she's here. Like you have access. And that's something I know you don't, Simon, right? Like that's like not everybody does, right? And she said, maybe what does it feel like to explore that relationship and maybe strip away what you're doing to push it away? So I actually sat down with her not that long ago and told her about some of this. And I told her, and I thought this would be possibly a really like horrific thing to hear from me, right? Like this part of my hesitation is how painful for me to go to her and say, I keep you at a distance. And I'll tell you why. I do it. I figured it out. I do it because there's a primal trauma, that there's a wound that you caused me. And I'm afraid that you can hurt me again. And I have to say, she was astonishingly gracious in making a space to say, to not make it about her, right? And in this way, she mothered me. In the way that I mother, my 2-year-old when he like wants me at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I do not want to get up and go sit on the couch, but that is what I did last night. She mothered me, and when whatever it felt for her, she said, I'll hear you and I'll listen to you, and I'll let this be about you telling me that I hurt you. And we spent some time on that. And that's hard. Like intellectually, we talk about that intellectual part. I know. I all day long, I will tell you, I'd be happy to defend Maureen's decision to do that. She was 20 years old. She was Catholic. She was raised in a community of people who told her she had terribly sinned and that she could redeem herself in one way by giving her baby away. She was told she would have no support. She went to her parents. She begged them to help keep me. They told her she would be thrown out. She had no path. She told me that her mother wheeled her out of a hospital after her C-section, and she was begging, take me back in, give me my baby. She wanted to undo the papers. And her mom bundled her into the car drove her home.
Wow.
Everybody worked to push her in this space. And before she even got to any of that, this family system that was that way, she had been a victim of sexual assault and rape by a neighbor. Her family had not helped her. This has happened to her when she was a child. And this is her story, and I'm co-opting it in a way, but we've kind of talked about this, and she's been very gracious about letting me explore in that space as well. But she told me sex wasn't a thing that she could say no to at that time, that she disassociated from her trauma when someone propositioned her in any way. So she ends up pregnant because she's not fully present because of all these system that she's in, right? And then once the system has her, it says there's one answer. And it's not that you get to mother and not that you get to keep your baby.
So I want to just take you back about three minutes or so.
Yeah.
You didn't keep your Maureen, your birth mother, at a distance. You didn't do it.
No, I mean, I did for a while. I mean,
No, you didn't.
No, but in the end, you're right. You're right. I thought, oh, it was hard. I mean, Simon, it was. I spent a lot of time really thinking about, like, what would it be like to really open this up and bring her in.
It was the trauma. It was the trauma that kept at a distance. It wasn't you.
Oh, well, yeah. I guess that's a really good insight. It was a barrier to me, right?
Sorry?
It was a barrier to me. This trauma was here, forcing, like I felt, and it's interesting that I just used the word felt, because I think talking to her about it seems to have loosened this.
Yeah. Right.
Talking to her about it seems to have been healing.
Yeah, it is. Because you're expressing the truth, aren't you? See, I know that trauma was the barrier, because that was the barrier between me and my birth mother, and she was dead, but there was still a barrier between us. And reading the letter from her that she'd written just after 4 or 5 days after she'd placed me, to use the PC term.
To use the term.
That reading that letter from her 48 years after that removed the barrier between me and her. So I know that trauma was the barrier between me and her, and it wasn't you that kept Maureen at arm's length. It was the barrier. That's what did it.
You froze.
I froze. Yeah, so did you.
Well, there we go. Well, hopefully you're able to edit that out. You know that trauma was the barrier.
I know the trauma was the barrier. Yeah, it wasn't anything that you did. It wasn't it wasn't uppercase. It wasn't uppercase S. If we're going to go to use if we're going to use IFS language, it wasn't uppercase S. Self.
Right.
True self.
Right.
Yeah. It was the
trauma in the way.
Trauma in the way. That's it gets in the way. That's what it does.
And such a stunning thing for you. I mean, you had the barrier of death in your way, but because this letter existed, gave you this opportunity to address some of this trauma. And I know you do a lot of advocacy work and have been organizing to help people learn more about that space. And I think one of the most important things that all of us can do as advocates is to say truth should be available. I should be able to have my birth records. My birth record shouldn't be a lie. These letters, these any information about identity are files. Those are ours in a fundamental way. The names, my name was Danielle. My name wasn't Sarah. Danielle Susan Coughlin is the person that I was, and it was hidden from me. And as part of my healing journey, I've been doing a lot of exploration of being able to not just stop othering Maureen, my birth mother, but I've been othering Danielle. It's actually really painful for me to say that. Everybody else gave her up.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to talk over you. Sorry, I talk over you there. No, you haven't been othering Danielle. Your trauma has been othering Danielle. Sorry, I'm not.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that because she's been harmed by it, and it's taken me a really long time to see her as me, to say I am Danielle, as well as all the other things that I am. And I guess maybe you're right. I didn't hurt myself. The system did, and this trauma that I experienced did. But you know what? I can heal myself by coming back into connection with Danielle as me.
Yeah. I think that's what I haven't done any parts work therapy, but I've spoken to a lot of adoptees who do parts work therapy and who have done parts work therapy. And that's, it's what Jill Bolte Taylor would call a team huddle, not an expulsion. So there's this woman, that neuroanatomist I interviewed a couple of months or so ago, and she talks about the team huddle. So if we I'm mixing my metaphors here. So the team includes all of our parts. And it's about bringing all our parts in rather than trying to boot them out or silence them. And that's what we do. That's what I've done. That's what I've done with the anger stuff. And that's what you talked about doing with the anger stuff. We're trying to silence our parts rather than listen to them.
Yes. And I think that part of making that space to hear them is also recognizing, hey, we can listen without necessarily letting that part be the one to decide what we do.
No, that's why you have a team huddle, because you do it as a team.
That's why you have the team huddle, so that what you do becomes purposeful and not driven by trauma, right?
And having interviewed, let me say it a slightly different way. No, I can't. It is sorry. Another little story's come to my mind. So I know an adoptee advocate who I've interviewed for the show, and she says she's called Joy, British. Can't remember her surname. It's a long time ago, probably first 20 or so episodes. So, and we're on 460 or something like that. So nuts. She said, if we go in to advocate, showing any sign of anger, then we're cancelled. I think is the word that's used these days. Ignored is what she said. we're shut out. This was before this.
We are shut out.
We are shut out. So we need to be. We need to be. Yeah. We need to be.
And this is such a difficult conversation. Simon,
Yeah.
are you aware of the Facebook group Adoption Facing Realities?
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Okay, it's okay. Well, it's very interesting because
I'm a member of some of them, but you know, like I don't.
It's a group that's very that's trying to focus on giving adoptees the room to speak, including the space to be angry. But it gets a little confused in there because, as you're saying, if you're advocating and you're mixing in kind of the therapeutic venting space, you get canceled. You don't get heard. You don't have a platform. And it's funny, I tried to advocate for that in there in a way that I was attempting to be very gentle, and I got booted right out. I got canceled by the adoption group. And then I'm sitting there feeling a lot of feels about it, right? I'm like, my own people just threw me out, right? So I think that it's interesting that can even be a controversial space, right? Like this idea, this thing that you're saying, my point is the thing that you're saying, that we get canceled if we get angry and we're advocating, I think is hands down true. And so for me, I try to spend a lot of time being very conscious of, well, what am I doing here? Am I here to persuade somebody? Or am I here because I'm trying to deal with something I've got going on internally, and just mark those as different spaces, right?
Yeah. I love the intentionality there. I love that. I love the consideration that goes into that. I hope that I haven't misspoken with anything that I've said in the last couple of minutes. Because I'm just saying that's what another advocate told me. We need to be.
Yeah, no, and it's something to consider, right? Because also maybe some righteous indignation, it's hard to know. I shared a story very recently on my Facebook page about the experience of going to change my name after I got married and having to fill out this form, and it asked me, my parents' names and my name at birth. And the entire time that I'm filling this out, I'm feeling a lot of rage, actually, right? That I'm lying. That they could have set up the system so that I could put in both pieces of information. They could have not falsified my birth certificate, right? Like, these are all options. There were absolutely ways to do this that were better. And I spent a lot of care in writing this kind of out and trying to think about, well, how can I express the sense of my outrage in an accessible way? And that was it's a difficult thing. And then there's a burden that it places. I mean, isn't this always the truth? Like, who's ever at the bottom of the oppression heap ends up having to do all the emotional labor, whether it's us as adoptees trying to push up to everyone, say, hey, we're doing a bunch of work, and you run to these groups where adoptive parents are like, you're wrong. You're like, great, thanks, fuck you.
Yeah. Oh, something I meant to say earlier on, talking about it's back to birth parents, but back to so you talked about being conscious yourself. Like you said something really great about your birth mum when you said that how she had been when you had this conversation with her. And one of the things I've heard from a few people is that it's often the rawness is still the rawness of the trauma is still there for our birth mums, and so
yeah.
they haven't a lot of them might have a lot of them may have not done the work, had the resources to do the work, and we've usually done some sort of work before we go for the reunion, going down the reunion route. So hopefully we are on our way, and sometimes they're behind us, and so it was great to hear of how she'd clearly done some stuff or seen some stuff differently, which made it made for a better
and it made for a better conversation, I think, for both of us. But I'll say, like, our relationship has been evolving for, it's like 21 years now, and we were neither of us, I think, walked in to Reunion with a lot of knowledge or education. And I guess we're both lucky in a way, or we're both, or kudos to both of us.
Yeah.
Because
I'm going to go for the
kudos for us, because when it got tender, when it got hard, we had distancing, we had pulling back, but we have stayed in it. Yeah. And the result of the conversation we most recently had was kind of an exchange of notes that we wrote each other, kind of reaffirming, like, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
We'll stay in it. And we'll just keep working this through together. Which,
and that's it. Yeah.
In a lot of ways, that's it. That's it, right?
Yeah. It a lot of things come down to tenacity, persistence, and patience, don't they?
Well, tenacity is a trait that I am told I have in spades, for both good or ill.
Well, yeah. The last conversation
I
had,
based on my knowing of my birth mother, that it's an inherited one.
All right. I just think, like, how much good does knowing that, that tenacity, the tenacity, persistence, patience. Yeah.
It's there.
Sticking with it, sticking with it.
It is.
Sticking with
all right. How do we circle this all up here? What have we achieved today?
Well, sticking with it, really. Could be the motto for Reunion. It could be the motto for life. It could be the motto for healing. It's just sticking with
healing it. Is showing up, sticking to it. I mean, and maybe that's it, if that's a takeaway, because we have our dark moments, right? It's not easy. The journey.
And sometimes, like, sometimes we have to halt the journey, right? And take a bit of a breather,
take a rest. Yeah.
I sometimes think,
right?
I sometimes think about the podcast that, would I have more subscribers if I did less episodes? Because people just can't keep up with it, But I know, at this point, I'm sticking with it.
Sticking with it.
Sticking with it.
I think it's good. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to stick with the larger discussion with you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too. And I'm going to give you that kudos back again. And both your mums, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of love, listeners. We'll speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.